You got to get the horn sheaths off before you start. But something like a sheep, you'd have to do that way. But you've obviously got to get all the soft tissue off. There's a lot of different ways to do that. The step that most people skip, and to me the most important step in obtaining a good quality result, is to degrease it. That bone has naturally got grease in it. If you don't get it out, it's eventually going to come out. And I'll show you what it looks like as we get on into it. Then after I feel like I've got all the grease out of it, I'll whiten it using peroxide. I'll start out with some no-nos. This is what I said a while ago. If you've got a method that works for you, you might want to ignore some of what I'm telling you, if you're happy with it. I say don't boil skulls. I started out boiling skulls because I didn't know any better. They turned out good occasionally. This was one of the first skulls I ever did. It was as white as this one at one time. Look at it now. Look how yellow it is. That's that grease. That grease is going to come out eventually. You may not do it in 6 months. It may be 2 years. I probably cleaned this one 7, 8 years ago. And I've left it so I can show people what happens if you don't get all the grease out of it. And the reason I say don't boil, what the heck have I done? Is, to me, the boiling makes the grease harder to get out instead of easier. You can put detergent in the water when you're boiling it or simmering it, and it'll clean the grease right off of the surface. You put it in the peroxide to whiten it, it looks great. But down the road, it changes. If you're going to simmer them over a turkey cooker, don't use Mama's good pots and pans. Mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. She ain't going to be happy with you if you use her pots and pans. And don't do it in the house. Get your turkey cooker, set it up outside if you're going to do that. I don't recommend it, but you know, a lot of people still do it that way. Don't use any chlorine bleach product. Chlorine attacks the cellular structure of the bone, and it'll start a reaction and it'll start flaking. And unless you put some kind of a real good sealer on it, it'll just keep on flaking. You'll eventually end up with a pile of dust. So don't use chlorine on bone. Soft tissue removal. Skin it. We're trappers, we can figure that out, right? But I caution people, don't cut straight down with your knife blade. You know, cut from the side. You're not as likely to scratch the bone up doing it that way. Deer can be right aggravating to get this hide off around the burrs and stuff, but you just got to take your time. You can figure it out and get it off. Remove as much of the flesh as you can. The fat, the tongue, the eyes, and the brain. A lot of people say, how you get the brain out? That's a real good question. You can stand back here with a hose and shoot at it with the head turned up like this, and guess what's going to happen? It's going to shoot right back in your face.
You're going to wear it.
You're going to wear it. That's right. You may even get to taste it. But I got a little tool that I made. I can't take credit for designing it. I stole it off taxidermy.net. It's got a simple little fitting you can buy at Lowe's Home Improvement for about $6 that goes from a spigot to a 1/4 inch compression fitting. It's in 1/4 inch tubing, bend it in a shepherd's hook. Middle of the winter, I can do this in my basement and not make a mess. Hook that up in the hole. Set it down like that. Then flush it right out. You may have to go in there with a screwdriver or a coat hanger or something and stir it up a little bit after the initial blast. But you can clean that brain cavity out pretty doggone good with that. People on taxidermy.net call it a brain blaster. This is one that's brand new, had never been in a brain. I keep it in I carry a tote with all my stuff in it. So I've always got it with me. Works real good. Keep hitting the wrong button this morning. But the brain's got a lot of grease in it. I especially want to get it out before I move on to the next operation. The sooner you can get that grease away from the bone, the less trouble it'll be in the long run. And the brain stinks real bad when it starts to break down. A lot of ways to get the rest of the meat off the bone. We already talked about boiling and simmering. If you're going to use hot water, don't bring it to a rolling boil. Keep it just at a slow simmer. And try to minimize the amount of time you keep it in the water. Take it out, trim as much flesh off as you can, and put it back in a little while and do the same thing till you get it off. The top three methods are probably the three most used methods. Domestic beetles, got nothing bad to say about them. Maceration is the process that I use. It's basically putting the prep skull in a bucket of water, keeping it warm for several days. There are other ways to do it. I've heard other people anchoring them down to fire ant hills and turning the tub upside down over them. If you don't put something over top of them, the critters will get them and try to drag them off. I've had people say they bury them in the ground. You bury them in this ground right here, it's a whole lot like it is around my house. Red dirt. They'll be red stained and you will never get that mineral stain out of them. Peroxide won't touch it. Some people hang them up in a tree, hang them up under a shed, let the flies blow them, let the maggots clean them. That works pretty good in hot weather. It don't work so good in wintertime. But the rest of the presentation, I'm basically going to concentrate on the first three methods because those are the ones that are most often used. Talk a little bit about the goods and the bads of each one as I go through it here. Simmering is fairly easy. You don't have to have a lot of equipment. It's probably the quickest way to get the meat off the bone. But I tell people if I'm boiling meat on a bone, I'm getting ready to eat. Yeah, it ain't cleaning the deer skull. You don't want to use any kind of a pan that would react like aluminum or cast iron. You want a non-reactive pot, stainless or those blue porcelain cannon type pots. You can add sow soda to it. It's also known as washing soda. But here's where part of the inconsistency comes in. If you get too much sow soda or you keep it too hot too long, it'll start flaking almost like you've had it in chlorine. So but it will speed the process up. It'll sort of jelly the meat and make it easier to wash off. The cons we've talked about: too much heat will damage the bone. The sow soda can damage the bone. These fine bones right here in the nose, a lot of times you get too much sow soda, you'll completely destroy them. You get them too hot and they'll start crumbling and just fall completely out. Your average deer hunter don't know the difference. If those bones were missing, a lot of them wouldn't even miss them. But I notice. And the people that do them for museums notice. You know, they want all of the bone structure left. I couldn't get consistent results. I'd get one that turned out nice like this before it turned yellow. Then I'd get another one that'd get flaky. I'll pass this one around, but you can see this green right here. That's soft tissue that was between where that nose bone slides on and the main part of the snout. Boiling didn't get that out. I've cut one here, and there'd be gunk in the brain cavity too that didn't get all of it out. But that's what happens with too much heat or too much sour soda, and I just never could get a consistent enough result. Oh, the other thing is, I mentioned before, I think the heat sets that grease in the bone instead of making it come out. Alright. Domestic beetles does a great job. They're a flesh-eating beetle. They're also known as a carpet beetle. They do a good job. You've got a colony of them, they'll breed, and the larvae will get up in the nooks and the crannies. They do a real nice job on getting the soft tissue off of the bone. They don't damage the bone. They'll clean the hard cartilage up, but they won't chew on the bone. Works for all skulls, especially the small ones. If I was going to do bird skulls, I'd have a colony of domestic beetles. If I was going to try to do fish, I'd have domestic beetles. They work good for deer, they work for elk, bison, you know, elk, mule deer, whatever, bear. Yeah, they do a good job. They don't like hogs particularly because they are just so fat. They're better at eating flesh than they are at eating fat. The downside of the beetles, you got to maintain that colony to have it to do the work when you have the work to do. You can't just start one up this week and be able to clean deer skulls next week. You got to have enough beetles, and you got to have an enclosure to keep them in. You got to control the temperature and the humidity in that enclosure. If you don't, you'll get mites that'll wipe out your colony. You'll get, if you let flies get in there, they lay eggs, the maggots hatch out, they're sort of slimy, and the beetles don't like a slimy environment, they like it more dry. Matter of fact, they like the meat to be partially dried out on the skulls that you're feeding. You don't want to let them get out. You don't want to get in your house. If you got any taxidermy work in your house at all, they'll get in it. They'll get in your carpets. There's enough oil in the carpet, or there's enough oil even in a tanned skin that they get in it. Next thing you know, you'll have a pile of hair on the floor under it. They'll ruin your taxidermy work. I got $7,000 to $8,000 worth of taxidermy work hanging on the wall in the house, and I don't want beetles nowhere close to it. There's a little bit of odor involved. Not real bad, but most people that have domestic beetles will set them up in a building out behind their shop or something like that, where they can close the room off and air condition it in the summer. Because if it gets over 85 degrees, the adult beetles will start trying to start flying. And you got to have real fine screen wire to keep them from getting out, and more so to keep other stuff from getting in. You got to keep it ventilated, you got to keep air circulating in it all the time. There's some work involved in maintaining a colony. When I get a deer skull in, If I kill it myself, I know where it's been. I know how it's been handled. You know, I can get it skinned out, feed it to the beetles right away if I was going to do that. Somebody else brings me one, they might have hauled it around in the back of their truck 2 or 3 days before it got to me. Never froze it. Chances are there's going to be some fly eggs on it. I got to freeze that head for 2 or 3 days. Didn't get it out and thaw it out in an environment where flies can't get to it while it's thawing out, because the beetles won't eat it if it's frozen. So there's some pre-work you got to do to heads that you're taking in from the public. So that's another downside of it to me. That's another step in the process you got to go through. After they get through cleaning it, they won't necessarily all crawl over to the next head. A lot of them will, but you got to get some of the larvae and even some of the adults. You got to clean them out of the specimen after they're through with it. So you basically got to go through another step of either freezing it or putting it in water or something to try to get them out. And they're hard to flush out with a hose either. But they do a good job. A lot of museums, a lot of universities have dermestariums where they keep domestic beetles to do their cleaning. Maceration. Basically anybody can do it. Very little special equipment required. Matter of fact, the only piece of equipment required is a bucket and an aquarium heater. It'll get all the soft tissue out. Even that little green on that one that I passed around there, that wouldn't be there on a head that was macerated. It gets all of the soft tissue out around the teeth. A lot of times the teeth will fall out. A lot of times the nose bones will fall off. I can fix that with Elmer's white glue when I get through. And I think it helps to get the degreasing process underway. I can use it on heads that somebody's hauled around for 4 or 5 days and they stink to high heaven when I get them. I don't try to skin them, I just stick them in a bucket of warm water with the heater. I've gotten heads in that had dried up hide on them, and they work good for that as well. So the downside, it don't smell good. Guess what? We're trappers. We're used to dealing with stuff that stinks, right? I tell people it smells like money to me. Like I said, teeth fall out, lower jaws separate. Here's a fox. There's the puzzle. The lower jaws are 2 separate pieces. I'd have to glue back together. I'd have to glue all the teeth back in. And you can see I didn't do a very good job on this one. I didn't leave it in the degreaser long enough because it's turned yellow in places. And that's one reason I hadn't put it back together. Coyote does the same thing. The lower jaw will separate, the teeth will fall out. Small, delicate skulls, like fish or reptile, if you were going to do a snake, with all the ribs that they have, it'd fall apart and you'd have a heck of a puzzle to put back together. And if I was going to do them, I'd want beetles. And then I'd want to watch them real close before they ate all the connecting tissue between the ribs and the backbones. Yeah. Again, I use a non-reactive container. My bucket of choice. 3.5 gallon bucket. You can buy them at Lowe's, Home Depot, places like that. 5 gallon bucket will work, but most deer heads will fit down in the 3.5 gallon bucket. So you got less water to have to keep warm. I go ahead, again, I don't use any aluminum, any cast iron. I use plastic. You could use stainless steel, that would be fine. I use an aquarium heater. This is about a $25 heater. It's adjustable from 69 to 93 degrees. They make them in lots of different wattages. I use the lowest wattage. I use a 50-watt heater. I can plug a half a dozen of them into a power strip and not trip the breaker. And I basically put one, it's submersible. I put it right down in there and plug it in. What happens, the warm water promotes growth of bacteria, and the bacteria consumes the soft tissue. And it smells a whole lot like rotten flesh. So it does stink. I don't change the water. I'll add water to it if I need to keep the skull completely covered. If I change the water, I'd be pouring my bacteria out. Then the bacteria growth would have to start all over again and slow the process down. It gets kind of yucky and nasty looking, but it gets the job done. Most of us have seen that after we cut the head off of one. I've taken the eyes, the tongue, the lower jaw, because I don't normally keep the lower jaw. If somebody wants me to age the deer for them, I'll throw the lower jaw in the bucket and then rot the flesh off of it, or macerate it with the rest of it. Take it out and put it in the degreaser one cycle, and then I'll just pull the jaw out completely and put their name on it and save it for them. But you can see I trimmed it up pretty good. My maceration bucket with a skull in it. My maceration setup. I do this on my back deck. My brother and I share a driveway. He ain't never noticed it. And his house ain't 300 feet from mine, if it's that. But I put down an insulated board. Hard insulation. You can get it at Lowe's, Home Depot. I lay that down. Set my bucket with the warm water on top of that. Put the heater in it. Then I turn that trash can upside down on top of it. That helps keep the odor in. The odor can't get through the cracks in the deck because I've got that insulated board under it. The insulation helps keep the heat in it. The air pocket inside that trash can helps insulate as well. I macerate year round. I've had stuff out there macerating when it got down to below 10 degrees at night. Takes a little longer in colder weather because my heater's not big enough to keep it 93 degrees all night when it's extremely cold. You could add some insulation around the bucket, would help. Could put some more insulation in the top of that trash can, would help. But anything you do like that is going to give a place for mold to grow because it's going to be moist in there. So it takes a few more days. It takes a few more days. I've got 3 buckets set up macerating right now at home. Got a bear that was killed in eastern North Carolina a couple years ago, and I've got a couple beavers that another member of the association wanted me to clean for him, and I've got an otter skull that I'm cleaning for myself. But that's after 24 hours. I pulled it out. You can see a little bit of stuff starting to float, but you can see by and large you're still seeing that membrane on the bone. You can't see any of the bare bone. after 24 hours. This particular one was done in the summertime, so it was probably in the 90s during the day and the 70s at night, so help keep the temperature up. Day 2. What a difference a day makes. Lots and lots of stuff floating around, and you start to see some bare bone. Yeah, that's the bare bone right there. You see lots of gunk in the nose and in the nasal cavity there. That's a pretty hard piece of cartilage there between the two nostrils. That's one of the last things to clean up. Day 3, you can see a lot more bare bone today. But you can still see that cartilage in there. It's broken down a little more, but it's still there. But all of that's, you know, fairly clean. Day 4, the bacteria have been busy. All that stuff that was floating has pretty much been consumed or broken down to the point that it won't float anymore. There'll be a little sludge left in the bottom of the bucket. But you can still see that cartilage hanging on. But the rest of it looks pretty darn clean. There's another little chunk right there, right in the front that takes time. Day 5, still got that cartilage in there, but I went and got my tweezers and tugged on it just a little bit. Popped right out. I macerated that one 5 days. I took it out, hosed it off, moved on to the next operation. I generally tell people on a deer-sized animal, I expect it to take 7 to 10 days on average. Once in a while you get one a little quicker,